Hello, everyone. So today I wanted to discuss the article Shedding Light on Racist Realist Parent Engagement Through Experiences of Black Families and Other Mothers by Rebecca Rogers and Kelly Bird. It was published in the Qualitative Report in 2023. And this was one of the articles that was, amongst us for to be chosen for this assignment. And so this article is a review of McCarthy Fobert's book, Reckoning with Racism in Family School Partnerships, which mostly focuses on the experiences of like black families and how racism affects, their relationship with schools. And so the topic of this article is important because it examines the barriers of black families, the barriers that they face, when it comes to trying to be involved in their children's education. The article really relates to family studies because healthy family school partnerships play an important role in a child's academic success and overall well-being. It also connects to social work because social workers often advocate for families, and it helps strengthen family systems, and it works with them to like remove those barriers that can prevent those families from receiving those equal opportunities. The authors, they pretty much explain that black parents are often expected to be like involved in their children's education, but when they do become involved, they frequently experience like the racism and being excluded and just the unequal treatment. This article also just describes how like many black parents felt ignored by like school leaders, and they kind of felt dismissed during those school meetings, and just being excluded from just the decision making, um, despite the decision making, when it comes to the efforts of trying to just help their children and making sure that they're getting what they need. Another important concept is other mothers, which refers to community members who help care and support children who are not biologically their own. The author argues that these relationships strengthen families, and it communicates and should be recognized as valuable forms of parent engagement. This article strongly relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism because it highlights how systemic racism continues to influence family school partnerships. Um, so instead of replacing responsibility, you know, only on black parents, the authors encourage the schools to examine institutional practices that can create those barriers for their families. And so they do argue that creating equitable partnerships requires collaboratively with families from diverse backgrounds. The implications for social work are very significant. Social workers should advocate for policies and practices that promote equal family engagement. They should also practice just cultural humility, um, recognize the strength that happens within the black families and the communities. And I feel like those safe spaces should be created for those parents where they can feel respected and they can just simply feel heard. School social workers, in particular, they can serve as advocates between families and school personnel to help build and trust and improve that communication. Um, Overall, I thought that the article was very informative and I thought that it was very meaningful. One strength that I can say that it centers um the voices and just like the lived experiences of black families instead of just relying on like the statistics. Um, the article also provided like practical recommendations for like improving family school partnerships. One limitation is that it is a book review, and so rather than just like a regular research study, it mainly just discusses like the author's work instead of presenting like new information, new data. Um, However, I do believe that the article makes a very like important contribution because it encourages professionals to think critically about, racism and think about, advocating and just, like the equalness that should happen when it comes to education. Um, and I will say that lastly, this article emphasizes meaningful family engagement. It emphasizes that it cannot exist without the equity and the respect. It really just reminds us that racism continues to affect how Black families experience school and educational systems. The article also encourages educators and social workers to really, recognize these barriers and work towards systemic change. I believe the message in the article is very relevant for anyone that's like working with children at the moment and families as well because strong partnerships are built on trust and collaborating with one another and being inclusive. And so I feel like as future social workers, we have a responsibility to advocate and we have a responsibility to advocate for those different opportunities and be able to empower those families to have the voice in the decision makings that could affect their lives. So thank you.